Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is James Reed, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Creative at BDI. We are excited that so many of you could join us, and we want to thank you for making time to be with us for this important topic. And now, before we get started, I would like to invite each one of you to introduce yourselves in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Tell us your name and where you're from. Now, we have a lot to cover in our 30-minute session today, and we will be moving quickly, but we will have time for a short Q&A at the end of our presentation. So please put your questions in the chat as we go along. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, Jennifer Bedon, who is the Chief Philanthropy Officer at Helping Up Mission in Baltimore, Maryland. Jennifer joined Helping Up Mission as Chief Philanthropy Officer in July of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. She has 20 years of experience in fundraising for causes that improve the quality of life for the people of Baltimore. And she is especially passionate about equipping Helping Up Mission to maximize the impact of its new Center for Women and Children. And in her free time, Jennifer enjoys spending time with her husband and her daughters. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for being with us today. And I will turn it over to you to talk about the challenge that Helping Up Mission just recently faced.
Thanks, James. That was a great introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm going to tell you first about the challenge we had at Helping Up Mission, and maybe some of you can recognize the challenge that we had. So we experienced a real decline in our census, meaning the number of people that we're serving at Helping Up Mission. And we really dug down on what were the causes of our decline in census. And for us, it was that we had to freeze intake for a short amount of time during COVID, mandated by our health department. And people were fearful of coming inside to congregate living. They were also fearful of getting locked inside of congregate living because of some government program. So we had this problem of a reduced census during COVID, and we were having a tough time getting people to come back through our doors. I think we have a poll here now that we would like to run. So the poll question is this: did any of your missions or ministries experience a reduction in census or temporarily suspend services during COVID? I think that our wonderful administrator is going to launch the poll for us. It should be showing up on your screen now. As you answer the poll questions, I'll tell you that we had an extra problem at Helping Up Mission, which was our census was greatly reduced because of COVID at the same time that we were growing our number of beds. So we were in the process of opening a brand new Center for Women and Children before COVID struck. So we had fewer people coming through our doors and lots more beds coming online. And this was happening at the worst possible time, which you all know, because every single day during the pandemic, things just got worse for those we serve, right? In our case at Helping Up Mission, we primarily do long-term residential addiction recovery. And that problem was just at a critical place in our country with so many unintentional overdose deaths every single day. So before I go on, I will say this. I see some of you have answered the poll, and it looks like lots of you are saying that you did have the same problem that we had, which was a reduction in census and some kind of a suspension of services. So maybe you'll be able to relate to the problem that we were trying to solve. So we found ourselves with this problem, and here's what we did to try and solve it. Like many of you, my rescue mission spends a lot of resources communicating with donors, right? We want the best experts and the most powerful messages to, inspire people to contribute to our work. But to reach the people in need of services, we so often just rely on word of mouth. In fact, we have a saying here at Helping Up Mission that we just try and pray people in, right? And so we just felt like we needed to do something to really inspire people who were experiencing a crisis out in the community in need of services, but we needed to find a way to reach them. So what we did was turned to the same marketing and communication messages and the same tools that we use to reach our donors, and we applied those tools to trying to reach people who were in crisis in our community. And so we relied on our agency, right, to help us, because we knew that we needed expert, writing and content in order to get us to that place. So I'm going to turn it back to James so that he can talk us through how we did that.
So as Jennifer pointed out, our challenge was to build a marketing campaign that would reach people with the message that they do not have to die in their addiction, that help is available. And we can all agree this is such a critical, life-saving message, and so we wanted to do it right. So we went back to the basic elements of what makes a successful marketing campaign. And you can see those 5 elements on the screen. And we will take time to discuss each of these 5 elements as we go through this presentation today. So let's get started by jumping into research. So I have worked in fundraising for nearly 30 years, and I have worked on a lot of fundraising campaigns. But I never before had to develop a campaign to reach people locked in addiction and homelessness. And so to learn more about the unique needs of this group of people, we hired a professional researcher with experience working with vulnerable populations. We did both qualitative and quantitative research, and the data we got back was fascinating and extensive. But today we only have time to share one of the results from a survey that we did. And it gave us some really critical information. And Jennifer is going to talk a little bit more about that.
So we asked the question of those we were serving, what are the barriers that have kept you from using support services in the past, right? And 88% of those we asked, these were people who were experiencing homelessness, who had poverty and terrible situations due to addiction, right? What were the things that kept them from accepting services in the past? And 88% reported that they didn't know about services, they didn't know how to sign up, or they didn't know how to qualify. That was amazing. It was such a eureka moment for us, because it meant that the greatest reason that people weren't getting services in our community was a communication problem, right? A communication problem is something we know how to solve. If 88% of people had said we don't want services, well, that would have been a whole harder and much different problem for us. And so this survey result really validated the direction that we were heading in, that we needed a communication strategy because what we had was a communication problem.
All right, well, now we get to what I consider the creative alchemy part of this process. And so in addition to the survey result that Jennifer shared, we had reams of other research data, and our challenge was to take it and turn it into messaging. And if you've ever seen research results, you know there's a lot of data, and sometimes it's just all over the place. So turning it into a cohesive message is not necessarily a linear process. And so what we needed to do was come up with creative concepts that answered to the research and were true to what people told us, but then to use the research as a foundation and build beyond that to create an emotional hook that would intrigue people and draw them in. So based on the research, we developed the 3 creative concepts, and we tested these concepts with separate groups of men and women who had just recently come into Helping Up Mission. We got them together in a room, we showed them the creative, and then we listened to their overall feelings and also their suggestions for what kind of adjustments we should make to the concepts and to the messaging. So I'm going to quickly walk you through the 3 concepts that we tested. In this first one, we called the you concept because it focused on the emotions that someone might feel if they were trapped in homelessness and addiction. And so I do want to take just a moment to point out some of the key elements of these ads. And so there was a headline at the top. In this case, it said, "You are not alone." And that was the emotional hook, what would get attention and draw someone in. And then there was a subhead just below that, providing clarifying information. So in this case, it said, "Need a safe place to recover? We can help." And then there was a call to action at the bottom. In this case, it was text to a certain number. And then, of course, we had the logo. So in addition to testing the big creative concepts, we were also getting feedback on these different elements of the ads so that we could get the right combination of information to really reach people. So for example, in this ad, people felt that the subhead was too vague. It did not give enough information about what Helping Up Mission really provided. And we also learned that while many people had phones, they did not have texting. And so a texting response was not the way to go. So as we continue through this concept, you'll see that most of the images we used were images that represented emotions rather than specific people. And it turned out that men really loved this you-focused concept. And the good news was the women liked it too. And some of the comments that we heard were, one man said, "I did feel alone before coming to Helping Up Mission." Another one said, "I love it. I'm going to be heard and helped." Then we also tested a need-focused photo, but not surprisingly, people didn't really like this photo because I think they just didn't want to identify with somebody in that kind of a desperate situation. So for our second concept, we developed one that would be based on quotes and photos of different people who had gone through the program and now are on staff at Helping Up Mission. And the idea was to show the kind of success that is available at Helping Up Mission. And so what was striking to us was the difference between men and women for this concept. The women absolutely loved it. They could identify with these ads. One woman said, "I can picture myself being that person." Another woman said, "I want that. It gives me hope." However, the men really honestly tore these ads apart. For example, men reacted negatively to a statement like this, "I've been exactly where you are right now." Men would say, "No, you haven't." They had a much stronger perception that their stories were unique, and they just couldn't really identify with the photos and the quotes. And here's another example. In this case, some of the men took this too literally. One man said, "What do you mean she left with everything? That's not possible." Or they just couldn't relate. Another man said that this sequence of ads seemed like it was for a job training program. But as I said, the women really liked these ads. So then going on to our next concept, we tried to be as simple as possible. We really wanted to focus in on the basic needs that somebody on the street or in addiction might experience. But it turned out there were two big problems with these ads. One problem was that people took them too literally. For example, people thought this ad was only for domestic violence. The other thing was really pretty consistently, the people we talked to thought the ads were too simplistic, that they did not accurately reflect the services, the depth of services that Helping Up Mission offered. And so, for example, people scoffed at this ad. They already knew, they told us that we already know where to get food if we're hungry. And what they really needed was life transformation. And they felt that this just didn't convey that. And then we got to get to this ad. They thought that this might be an ad for rehabilitation after surgery or a hospital visit. And then in this ad, people got hung up on what the guy was wearing. They said he looks like he's in prison because of kind of a jumpsuit or something that he's wearing. So this concept was not a winner. And so in the end, we asked the staff at Helping Up Mission to really get involved in making the decision of what concept to use. Even though women preferred the staff concept, we went with the you concept because the men loved it and the women also liked it. And so we felt like that was a good compromise. So I do want to just take a moment to show you what we changed about the ads based on the feedback. So we kept the headlines, people reacted positively to those, but the subhead we really modified. We went with the subhead that reads, "Addiction recovery is possible. Get help today." And based on what people were telling us, they said, you got to be upfront and direct about what you're offering. And then we also went with a phone number as the primary call to action because most people have access to phones, but then we also had a website as a secondary call to action as well. And then at the very bottom, and I apologize, you probably can't read it on your screen, but there's a reference to long-term care and that also that it's in Baltimore, it's local. And then because the women responded so well to inspirational messages, we also added this one into the mix to use in settings where we could, target women. So now we are going to transition to media placement, which is absolutely critical. And Jennifer is going to talk to us about how she was very closely involved in this process.
Thanks. So we all know from fundraising that we spend a lot of time making great messages and then we have to deliver those messages to the right people, right? So we rely on our agency partners to help us, find our donors, to target where those donors live, to find donors that look like the ones we already have and deliver messages to them. But in this case, we were not trying to reach donors, right? We were trying to reach people who were in a crisis. And so the techniques that we had always used, weren't going to work for us this time. So we had to find our people. So, I called our local health department and I said, hey, where are your needle exchanges happening? Right? I called our police department and spoke to the community relations person and said, hey, where are the places where we are getting the greatest number of emergency calls for drug-related emergencies? And then we relied on our program staff and we said, you guys are out on the streets. Where are the problems? And they said, look at places where there are methadone clinics. Look at places where there are homeless encampments. We had started a mobile street outreach program here at Helping Up Mission. And so we were really able to rely on our staff who were out on the streets to be able to target those locations. So once we knew our locations, we did, a wide variety of media placements. We did outdoor and radio and digital and geofencing. We had kind of a funny thing that we were saying in some locations that people were getting our ads everywhere they looked. They were on the bus shelter. If you were doing search on your phone, we were doing paid search. If you were in a particular location, you were getting a geofenced ad. So, they had that old joke that you had to see an ad 7 times in order to take action. Well, we were going for 15 times, right? We were just delivering these ads left and right. And the reason that we were able to do that is because our partners got us our media placement at less than 1 cent per impression, right? So we really spent time trying to get the placements in the right places. And then we were really careful to watch the budget on that. James, I'm going to turn it back to you because now's the fun part, right? We got some pictures in the community.
Yes. So here are some examples of bus shelter ads. And these bus shelter ads were really a key part of the campaign because they gave us a big enough space to really feature the headlines, the photographs, and they're at street level. And so they are very obvious to somebody walking by. And even in a crisis situation, these ads could really jump out at you. So then we also developed a microsite for the campaign. And, Helping Up Mission has a great website, but there's a lot going on that website with information for donors, history about the mission, and so on. And so we wanted to have a special digital location just for people who are in crisis, who are looking for ways to get help. And so to facilitate this, We bought a new URL, helpingupmission.info, and it goes directly to this page and where someone could get help. And then I'm also thrilled that Helping Up Mission was able to extend the campaign by using the art on box trucks and on vans that are active in the community. Just a really great way to extend the campaign and get the messaging out there.
So we're going to talk about measuring success next, but I just want to say that by doing the van wraps and putting the ads on trucks, you can only buy media for a few months, unless you have all the money in the whole world. And so this means that all of those ads are still live every single day in our community when our trucks and vans go out. And so that was actually such a great way for us to extend the life of the ads. So in order to measure success, right, we who do a lot of donor communications know that we expect a return on investment in all the things that we do. And we know that something has worked because donations come in or volunteers enroll or people come to our gala, whatever it is. But in this case, we were really challenged because we needed to find a way to measure how many people saw the ads. So what we did was we made a unique brand new phone number that only existed on the ads. So the only way you could get the phone number was by seeing the ad. And then we created a 24-hour hotline for that phone number. And your rescue mission can do this too, and I'll tell you how, because I'll bet you have a lot of people who are trying to get various counseling certifications or peer recovery certifications, and they need hours. And so this was a way that lots of folks in our community could get the hours they needed for their peer recovery certification. Anyway, we were just blown away by the results on this. I won't dwell on it because you can see it on the screen, but we couldn't believe the hundreds and hundreds of phone calls that came just in the first month. By the time that we were 3 months in, we were over 1,000 phone calls to a number that didn't exist anywhere except on ads. So it really validated that for us. Okay, we got lots more hits to our, get help page on our website. 1,000% increase, I think all of us would be happy with. And but the real impact is that our census is now back up to the pre-COVID level. So we're back to census that we had in March of 2019, and that's really the measure that we were going for. So you may be interested to know how much this cost and how we paid for it. So we invested $325,000 in this campaign, and this is how we spent it. Almost a third of it was spent on the media buy, and because that's just expensive. And then a quarter of the funds went to the staff inside Helping Up Mission, who helped manage all the research and helped manage the people monitoring the 24-hour hotline and all of that. And then you can see how we broke up the rest of the funds into the various categories. And so the thing that I want to tell you is that we did not carve $325,000 out of the Helping Up Mission operating budget and decide to spend it on this, right? We went and sought funds in order to be able to afford this. And so if I can empower you in some way to want to do a project like this, I want to tell you that there are grants out there that you can access. We are just a regular rescue mission, just like anybody else, and we just went out and found grants. So health departments, state health departments, almost always, every state that I've investigated has had this, some kind of a grant program for vulnerable people to access health care. Sometimes they will fund an outreach campaign that will bring people into your care. We also found that there are a lot of new grants related to the opioid epidemic. So we found sort of two funding sources related to the opioid epidemic. Our state already had in place opioid epidemic funding because in Maryland, we were very, very, very impacted by the overprescription of opioid drugs. But recently, the opioid settlements have started to reach states. And I've put on the screen for you a website called Opioid Settlement Tracker. And it's the place where you can find how much money your state is getting from opioid settlements. And in Maryland, I've posted here a press release where our state is going to use our opioid funds for to make grants available to organizations who are making an impact. So I'm going to close up here with something that I hope you guys can relate to that really was important for us to share with you. And that is, through this whole process, you know, James and BDI sort of created a statement for us that I probably say this statement, you know, once a week to somebody at least. And it's that, you know, we believe that none of our friends, neighbors, and family members should die from substance abuse without knowing that help is available for them. So that is really the motivation behind doing a project like this. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to James.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer. Now we are going to take a few minutes to answer any questions you might have. So if you have not yet sent your question in the chat, please add it to the chat now, and we are going to just look and see what questions we might have. So here's a good one. Jennifer, I think this one might be for you. How did you find the time to do a campaign like this?
So thanks, James. So every one of my friends in fundraising who's on this webinar knows that we are so busy every single day doing like every single thing we can to raise the money to run our missions and ministries, right? I like to say we're like those plate spinners, right? Who are just spinning plates. And so what I did was I had to just figure out how to prioritize this. And it was not easy, and I burned the midnight oil a few times in this process, but it turned out that it was the best thing I did last year. It's the thing I'm most proud of. It's the thing that if anyone says, what did you do this year that mattered to you the most? It was this. So that's how I did it. Oh, James, we're getting a lot of good questions.
Yes, here's one regarding grant funding. Are these government grants restrictive of Christ-centered programming associated with biblical
Rachel, that
recovery?
is such a good question. So I'll tell you, government grants are available to religious organizations. I mean, in my community, the only people doing human service work are religious-based organizations. There's no one else doing that work. And so what we have found is that as long as we separate the money and the time from the ministry work, from whatever the government grant funded work is, that we are totally within our right to accept government funds. There's statutes from the federal government that go back to the first Bush administration that tell us that religious-based organizations can accept government funding for non-ministry work. So for instance, for a food program, for nights of shelter bed, things that go on in your missions and ministries that aren't necessarily spiritual in nature. I hope that answers your question.
Good. Jennifer, I think you should probably take Karen's question too in regard to response from the local community and response feedback from donors, and also about a press campaign.
Yeah, that is such a great question, Karen. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you the truth. Not a lot of donors saw these ads. We did not place them in places where our donors were likely to see them. And they were in such tough neighborhoods, some of them, that they weren't even on people's commuter lines. So the way that we let our donors know about this was that we just told them, right? We put it in our newsletter. We communicated with donors that we were doing this, and they just loved it, right? Because they believed that it is in fact the work that they're supporting for us to try and find people to come inside our walls, right? They believe that that's what they're supporting. And so they just loved this program, but truthfully, not a whole lot of our donors came across it in their everyday lives. And yes, we did a PR component, Karen, to the second part of your question. We did do press releases also. And those were somewhat effective, you know, we got a few things picked up, but that was not truly the most effective part. But I'll tell you, in the past, without investing funds into a program, that would have been the only way we could access media, would be through public relations. We would have had to rely on the media we could win for free in order to get the word out. And so that's why winning a grant and investing in this strategy was really so impactful.
Good. Well, we are at our time. It's 11:30 here on the Pacific Coast, and so we will wrap up. But thank you everyone for joining us today. It was great to have you with us. Good questions, and certainly feel free to reach out through other channels to either Jennifer or myself if you have additional questions or would like to discuss this further. And there is a question about getting a copy of this webinar. I believe it's downloadable in one of the places, but we can send an email about that later. So thank you, Karen, for that question. All right. It says the webinar deck is available in the handouts tab at the top of your chat bar. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We will sign off and we'll see you again another time for another BDI webinar. Thank you.